Hi, everyone. Hope you're doing well today. I'm thinking about you. You made it. You made it through the first week. Today's Friday, and we're going to keep reading poems and stories. So I hope everyone's doing well. I hope you're staying safe. And let's take a look at our poem for today. So a poem I thought would be good for today is one called Cutting Loose by William Stafford. William Stafford was an American poet, and he wrote a lot about nature and just kind of quiet, ordinary moments that happen. And he was a wonderful poet and prolific. There's a ton of his poems out there, so feel free to look for more. But before I read this, I'll just show you where I'm seeing it right now on this website called On Being, and it's a podcast as well. And it's about a lot of kind of philosophical ideas, so I really encourage you to try that too. But this poem is called Cutting Loose, so I'll just read you the poem. Cutting Loose. Sometimes from sorrow, for no reason, you sing. For no reason, you accept the way of being lost, cutting loose from all else and electing a world where you go where you want to. Arbitrary, a sound comes, a reminder that a steady center is holding all else. If you listen, that sound will tell you where it is, and you can slide your way past trouble. Certain twisted monsters always bar the path, but that's when you get going best, glad to be lost, learning how real it is here on earth again and again. So this poem is kind of about, I think, sort of accepting the way of being lost. And that's certainly where we all are right now, maybe a bit lost. And in the second stanza, I love this idea, a sound that reaches you that is a reminder of a steady center that holds all else. That kind of reminds me of what we were talking about in the beginning of the week with this idea of going with the flow of the Tao, and this idea that there's a force that kind of holds everything. No matter what's happening, it kind of holds us together and is at the center of all things. And then the last line of the poem is so beautiful too. Certain twisted monsters always bar the path, but that's when you get going best, glad to be lost, learning how real it is here on earth again and again. So it's this idea of it's okay to be lost, and even maybe good for us to get in touch with that. So I feel like that's where we are a little bit now, right? So if you're feeling lost, if you're feeling disconnected or sad or any of those feelings, completely normal, we're all there. We're all in the same boat. And I think just to stay in the center and be calm and kind of sit with those feelings is the best that you can do for yourself right now. And read books. So let's go back to our Tuesdays with Morrie. So here we are back with Morrie. I'm picking up right where I left off yesterday. So if you're just finding this now, feel free to go back and listen to some of the earlier videos for obviously the earlier part of the story. But here's where we left off. He enters the classroom, sits down, doesn't say anything. He looks at us. We look at him. At first, there are a few giggles, but Morrie only shrugs, and eventually a deep silence falls, and we begin to notice the smallest sounds, the radiator humming in the corner of the room, the nasal breathing of one of the fat students. Some of us are agitated. When is he going to say something? We squirm, check our watches. A few students look out the window, trying to be above it all. This goes on for a good 15 minutes before Morrie finally breaks in with a whisper. "What's happening here?" he asks. And slowly a discussion begins, as Morrie has wanted all along, about the effect of silence on human relations. Why are we embarrassed by silence? What comfort do we find in all the noise? I am not bothered by the silence. For all the noise I make with my friends, I am still not comfortable talking about my feelings in front of others, especially not classmates. I could sit in the quiet for hours if that is what the class demanded. On my way out, Morrie stops me. "You didn't say much today," he remarks. "I don't know. I just didn't have anything to add." "I think you have a lot to add. In fact, Mitch, you remind me of someone I knew who also liked to keep things to himself when he was younger." "Who?" "Me." The second Tuesday, we talk about feeling sorry for yourself. I came back the next Tuesday, and for many Tuesdays that followed. I looked forward to these visits more than one would think, considering I was flying 700 miles to sit alongside a dying man. But I seemed to slip into a time warp when I visited Morrie, and I liked myself better when I was there. I no longer rented a cellular phone for the rides from the airport. Let them wait, I told myself, mimicking Morrie. The newspaper situation in Detroit had not improved. In fact, it had grown increasingly insane, with nasty confrontations between picketers and replacement workers, people arrested, beaten, lying in the street in front of delivery trucks. In light of this, my visits with Morrie felt like a cleansing rinse of human kindness. We talked about life and we talked about love. We talked about one of Morrie's favorite subjects, compassion, and why our society had such a shortage of it. Before my third visit, I stopped at a market called Bread and Circus. I had seen their bags in Morrie's house and figured he must like the food there, and I loaded up with plastic containers from their fresh food takeaway, things like vermicelli with vegetables and carrot soup and baklava. When I entered Morrie's study, I lifted the bags as if I'd just robbed a bank. "Food man," I bellowed. Morrie rolled his eyes and smiled. Meanwhile, I looked for signs of the disease's progression. His fingers worked well enough to write with a pencil or hold up his glasses, but he could not lift his arms much higher than his chest. He was spending less and less time in the kitchen or living room and more in his study, where he had a large reclining chair set up with pillows, blankets, and specially cut pieces of foam rubber that held his feet and gave support to his withered legs. He kept a bell near his side, and when his head needed adjusting or he had to go on the commode, as he referred to it, he would shake the bell and Connie, Tony, Bertha, or Amy, his small army of home care workers, would come in. It wasn't always easy for him to lift the bell, and he got frustrated when he couldn't make it work. I asked Morrie if he felt sorry for himself. "Sometimes, in the mornings," he said, "that's when I mourn. I feel around my body, I move my fingers and my hands, whatever I can still move, and I mourn for what I've lost. I mourn the slow, insidious way in which I'm dying. But then I stop mourning." "Just like that?" "I give myself a good cry if I need it, but then I concentrate on all the good things still in my life, on the people who are coming to see me, on the stories I'm going to hear, on you if it's Tuesday, because we're Tuesday people." I grinned. Tuesday people. "Mitch, I don't allow myself any more self-pity than that. A little each morning, a few tears, and that's all." I thought about all the people I knew who spent many of their waking hours feeling sorry for themselves. How useful it would be to put a daily limit on self-pity. Just a few tearful minutes, then on with the day. And if Morrie could do it with such a horrible disease... "It's only horrible if you see it that way," Morrie said. "It's horrible to watch my body slowly wilt away to nothing. But it's also wonderful because of all the time I get to say goodbye. He smiled. Not everyone is so lucky. I studied him in his chair, unable to stand, to wash, to pull on his pants. Lucky? Did he really say lucky? During a break, when Morrie had to use the bathroom, I leafed through the Boston newspaper that sat near his chair. There was a story about a small timber town where 2 teenage girls tortured and killed a 73-year-old man who had befriended them, then threw a party in his trailer home and showed off the corpse. There was another story about the upcoming trial of a straight man who killed a gay man after the latter had gone on a TV talk show and said he had a crush on him. I put the paper away. Morrie was rolled back in, smiling, as always, and Connie went to lift him from the wheelchair to the recliner. "You want me to do that?" I asked. There was a momentary silence, and I'm not even sure why I offered, but Morrie looked at Connie and said, "Can you show him how to do it?" "Sure," Connie said. Following her instructions, I leaned over, locked my forearms under Morrie's armpits, and hooked him toward me as if lifting a large log from underneath. Then I straightened up, hoisting him as I rose. Normally, when you lift someone, you expect their arms to tighten around your grip, but Morrie could not do this. He was mostly dead weight, and I felt his head bounce softly on my shoulder, and his body sag against me like a big, damp loaf. "Ah," he softly groaned. I gotcha, I said. Holding him like that moved me in a way I cannot describe, except to say I felt the seeds of death inside his shriveling frame, and as I laid him in his chair, adjusting his head on the pillows, I had the coldest realization that our time was running out, and I had to do something. It is my junior year, 1978, when disco and Rocky movies are the cultural rage. We are in an unusual sociology class at Brandeis, something Morrie calls group process. Each week we study the ways in which the students in the group interact with one another, how they respond to anger, jealousy, attention. We are human lab rats. More often than not, someone ends up crying. I refer to it as the touchy-feely course. Morrie says I should be more open-minded. On this day, Morrie says he has an exercise for us to try. We are to stand, facing away from our classmates, and fall backward, relying on another student to catch us. Most of us are uncomfortable with this, and we cannot let go for more than a few inches before stopping ourselves. We laugh in embarrassment. Finally, one student, a thin, quiet, dark-haired girl whom I notice almost always wears bulky white fisherman sweaters, crosses her arms over her chest, closes her eyes, leans back, and does not flinch, like one of those Lipton tea commercials where the model splashes into the pool. For a moment, I am sure she is going to thump on the floor. At the last instant, her assigned partner grabs her head and shoulders and yanks her up harshly. "Whoa!" several students yell. Some clap. Morrie finally smiles. "You see," he says to the girl, "you closed your eyes. That was the difference. Sometimes you cannot believe what you see. You have to believe what you feel. And if you are ever going to have other people trust you, you must feel that you can trust them too, even when you're in the dark, even when you're falling." The third Tuesday, we talk about regrets. The next Tuesday, I arrived with the normal bags of food, pasta with corn, potato salad, apple cobbler, and something else, a Sony tape recorder. "I want to remember what we talk about," I told Morrie. "I want to have your voice so I can listen to it later. When I'm dead." "Don't say that." He laughed. "Mitch, I'm going to die, and sooner, not later. He regarded the new machine. So big, he said. I felt intrusive, as reporters often do, and I began to think that a tape machine between two people who were supposedly friends was a foreign object, an artificial ear. With all the people clamoring for his time, perhaps I was trying to take too much away from these Tuesdays. Listen, I said, picking up the recorder. We don't have to use this. If it makes you uncomfortable... He stopped me, wagged a finger, then hooked his glasses off his nose, letting them dangle on the string around his neck. He looked me square in the eye. Put it down, he said. I put it down. Mitch, he continued, softly now, you don't understand. I want to tell you about my life. I want to tell you before I can't tell you anymore. His voice dropped to a whisper. I want someone to hear my story. Will you? I nodded. We sat quietly for a moment. So, he said, is it turned on? Now, the truth is that tape recorder was more than nostalgia. I was losing Morrie. We were all losing Morrie. His family, his friends, his ex-students, his fellow professors, his pals from the political discussion groups that he loved so much, his former dance partners, all of us. And I suppose tapes, like photographs and videos, are a desperate attempt to steal something from death's suitcase. But it was also becoming clear to me, through his courage, his humor, his patience, and his openness, that Morrie was looking at life from some very different place than anyone else I knew. A healthier place, a more sensible place, and he was about to die. If some mystical clarity of thought came when you looked death in the eye, then I knew Morrie wanted to share it, and I wanted to remember it for as long as I could. The first time I saw Morrie on Nightline, I wondered what regrets he had once he knew his death was imminent. Did he lament lost friends? Would he have done much differently? Selfishly, I wonder if I were in his shoes, would I be consumed with sad thoughts of all that I had missed? Would I regret the secrets I had kept hidden? When I mentioned this to Morrie, he nodded. It's what everyone worries about, isn't it? What if today were my last day on earth? He studied my face, and perhaps he saw an ambivalence about my own choices. I had this vision of me keeling over at my desk one day, halfway through a story, my editors snatching the copy even as the medics carried my body away. Mitch, Morrie said. I shook my head and said nothing, but Morrie picked up on my hesitation. Mitch, he said, the culture doesn't encourage you to think about such things until you're about to die. We're so wrapped up with egotistical things, career, family, having enough money, meeting the mortgage, getting a new car, fixing the radiator when it breaks. We're involved in trillions of little acts just to keep going. So we don't get into the habit of standing back and looking at our lives and saying, is this all? Is this all I want? Is something missing? He paused. You need someone to probe you in that direction. It won't just happen automatically. I knew what he was saying. We all need teachers in our lives. And mine was sitting in front of me. Fine, I figured. If I was to be the student, then I would be as good a student as I could be. On the plane ride home that day, I made a small list on a yellow legal pad, issues and questions that we all grapple with, from happiness to aging to having children to death. Of course, there were a million self-help books on these subjects and plenty of cable TV shows and $90 per hour consultation sessions. America had become a Persian bazaar of self-help. But there still seemed to be no clear answers. Do you take care of others or take care of your inner child? Return to traditional values or reject tradition as useless? Seek success or seek simplicity? Just say no or just do it? All I knew was this: Morrie, my old professor, wasn't in the self-help business. He was standing on the tracks, listening to death's locomotive whistle, and he was very clear about the important things in life. I wanted that clarity. Every confused and tortured soul I knew wanted that clarity. Ask me anything, Morrie always said. So I wrote this list: death, fear, aging, greed, marriage, family, society, forgiveness, a meaningful life. The list was in my bag when I returned to West Newton for the 4th time, a Tuesday in late August, when the air conditioning at the Logan Airport terminal was not working and people fanned themselves and wiped sweat angrily from their foreheads, and every face I saw looked ready to kill somebody. All right, we're going to stop there for today, you guys. Have a good rest of the day. Be well. Rest. And remember from our poem, it's okay to be lost. It's okay to not conquer your to-do list or anything like that. Just be present to yourself. Have a great rest of the day. Bye-bye.